Eric Liddell, the Scot whose life began and ended in China. Many people will connect the name Eric Liddell to the movie Chariots of Fire, made in 1981, that contrasted the lives of both Liddell and Harold Abrahams. But having a few years ago watched the movie On Wings of Eagles, originally called The Last Race, starring Joseph Fiennes in the lead role, the movie portrays the life of Eric Liddell on his return to China after the fame and publicity of the 1924 Olympic Games in Paris. In this video, we'll take a look at his life after the fame he achieved and the humble lifestyle he chose in devoting his life to helping others. Eric Henry Liddell was born in Tianjin, China on the 16th of January 1902, the son of Scottish missionaries. Much of his school life was at boarding schools in the UK, first close to London, then spending time with family in Edinburgh before attending the University of Edinburgh. He found fame as a Scottish sprinter, was an accomplished rugby player, and devoted much of his life to becoming a Christian missionary in China. Controversy at the Olympics. At the 1924 Summer Olympics in Paris, Eric Liddell refused to run in the heats of his favourite event, the 100 metres, because the heats were held on a Sunday, and competing on that day would go against his religious beliefs. Instead of the 100 metres, he entered the 400 metres, as the heats and eventual final were held on weekdays, a race he was not expected to do so well at, but despite this, he won the event. Eric Liddell became ordained as a congregational minister and regularly taught Bible classes at Morningside Congregational Church in Edinburgh. In 1925, he returned to China, and aside from 2 furloughs in Scotland, he remained in China until his death in a civilian internment camp operated by the Japanese Army in 1945. Early life. Eric Liddell was born on the 16th of January 1902 in Tianjin, now known as Tianjin, China. He was the second son of the Reverend and Mrs. James Dunlop Liddell, Scottish missionaries with the London Missionary Society. Liddell attended school in China until the age of 5, when he, along with his older brother Robert, then aged 8, were enrolled at Eltham College, a boarding school in South London for the sons of missionaries. Leaving the 2 boys to study at Eltham, their parents and sister Jenny returned to China, returning 2 or 3 times on furlough and spending time as a family, mostly in Edinburgh. During his time at Eltham, Liddell was seen as an outstanding athlete, earning an award as Best Athlete of the Year, playing in the first 11 at cricket and the first 15 at rugby union, later becoming captain of both teams. While studying at the University of Edinburgh, Liddell became known as the fastest runner in Scotland. Newspapers of the time carried stories of his feats at track events, and several times he was heralded as a potential future Olympic winner. University of Edinburgh. In 1920, Eric Liddell followed his older brother Robert in gaining a place at the University of Edinburgh, with his primary focus on studying pure science. However, athletics and rugby also played a major part in his life while at university. He ran in the 100-yard and 220-yard races for the university, while also playing rugby for the university club. He represented Edinburgh District in their intercity matches against Glasgow District on the 3rd of December 1921 and the 2nd of December 1922. Those performances gained Liddell a place in the back line of a strong Scotland national rugby union team. In 1922 and 1923, Liddell played in 7 of 8 Five Nations matches, scored back-to-back tries in 4 of those appearances, and was part of the team that earned wins against Ireland, Wales and France. While his main weapon was his speed, the Scotsman newspaper gave the opinion that never again should Eric Liddell be regarded as just a runner. Another magazine heralded him as possessing that rare combination of pace and a gift of rugby, brains and hands. On the centenary of his first international appearance against France in January 1922, Eric Liddell was inducted into the Scottish Rugby Hall of Fame for his achievements on the rugby pitch. Eric Liddell became the national 100 yards champion as well as a national champion at 220 yards after winning both events at the 1923 AAA Championships. In the 100 yards event, he set a new British record of 9.7 seconds, a record that stood for 23 years before it was broken. In 1924, Eric Liddell graduated from the University of Edinburgh with a Bachelor of Science degree, shortly after his heroics at the 1924 Summer Olympics in Paris. On the 15th of July 2024, almost 100 years to the day after winning his 400-metre gold medal in Paris, the University of Edinburgh awarded Liddell a posthumous degree of Doctor Honoris Causa in recognition of his contribution to sport and humanity. The degree was accepted by his daughter, Patricia Liddell Russell, who had travelled from Canada for the ceremony. Paris Olympics. At the 1924 Summer Olympics hosted by Paris, the French capital, Liddell, a devout Christian, withdrew from the 100-metre event, his best event, due to the heats being held on a Sunday. The schedule had been published several months prior to the staging of the Games, and therefore his decision to withdraw was made with plenty of notice. Eric Liddell spent the months prior to the Olympics preparing for a 400-metre race, although his best time for the event of 49.6 seconds, which was set when winning the 3A Championships 440-yard race, was only modest in regard to international standards. The 400-metre final on the 11th of July 1924 had Liddell starting from the outside lane, depriving him of seeing any of the other runners. Liddell raced the first 200 metres hard to remain clear of the two favoured American runners, and then, with little option other than to treat the remaining second half of the race as a sprint, he continued running hard around the final bend. He was challenged all the way along the home straight, but managed to hold on to take the win by breaking the Olympic and world records in a time of 47.6 seconds. Eric Liddell's performance in the 400-metre race remained as a European record for the next 12 years before it was surpassed by another British runner, Godfrey Brown, at the 1936 Olympics held in Berlin. Liddell's religious beliefs also meant he was unable to compete in the Olympic 4x400 metre relay, as that event was held on a Sunday, with the British team finishing third. However, shortly after the Olympic Games ended, there was a British Empire versus the USA contest, where Liddell ran the final leg of the 4x400 metre relay to secure a victory over the Olympic champions. The following year, 1925, at the Scottish Amateur Athletics Association (SAAA) meeting at Hampden Park in Glasgow, Liddell equalled his Scottish Championship record of 10.0 seconds for the 100-yard race. He won the 220-yard event in a time of 22.2 seconds, in addition to winning the 440-yard event in a time of 47.7 seconds, as well as being in the team that won the relay. He was only the fourth athlete to have won all three sprint events at the SAAA, achieving this feat in 1924 and 1925. These were his final races on British soil. Christian missionary work in China. In 1925, Eric Liddell returned to northern China to serve as a missionary, just as his parents had done, first working in Tianjin before moving to the small town of Xiaozhang in Hebei province. This was a poor area that had become a particularly treacherous battleground against the invading Japanese army. During his time in China, Liddell continued to compete on occasion, including wins against members of the French and Japanese Olympic teams in the 200 and 400 meter races at the South Manchurian Railway competition in 1928, as well as a victory at the 1930 North China Championship. In that time, Liddell only returned to Scotland on 2 occasions, in 1932 and again in 1939. Liddell was asked if he regretted his decision to leave the world of fame and glory he received at the Olympics. Eric Liddell's response was that he was happy in the work he was engaged in, and that happiness counts far more than fame and glory he had received for his athletic performances. On arriving back in China, Liddell was first as a missionary at the Anglo-Chinese College for wealthy Chinese students. The headmaster of the school was Dr. Samuel Lavington Hart, who had been a prominent physicist after graduating from the University of Cambridge and founded the school in 1902. The belief of Dr. Hart was that by teaching the children of the wealthy, this would aid them in becoming influential figures in China while helping to promote Christian values. Eric Liddell supported the mission of the school and taught mathematics and science. Liddell further assisted in the development of his students through his experiences in athletics by training them in several sports. Liddell was also instrumental in protecting the rights of his students, even quarrelling with the headmaster when asking for greater subsidies for students from less wealthy families. One of Eric Liddell's many responsibilities included the role of superintendent of the Sunday school at Union Church, where his father had been pastor. Liddell lived at 38 Chongqingdao, formerly known as Cambridge Road, in Tianjin. While living in the city, Liddell also helped with the building of Minyuan Stadium. During Eric Liddell's first furlough from missionary work in 1932, he was ordained as a minister of the Congregational Union of Scotland. Upon his return to China, he married Florence Mackenzie, the daughter of Canadian missionaries, in Tianjin in 1934. The couple had 3 daughters, Patricia, Heather and Maureen. The youngest of those daughters, Maureen, Eric Liddell would not live to see. The school where Liddell taught is still in use today. One of his daughters visited the school in 1991, presenting the headmaster with one of the medals her father had won for athletics. In 1941, life in China had become extremely dangerous due to Japanese aggression, and the British government advised all British nationals to leave. Florence, who was pregnant with Maureen, and their 2 daughters left for Canada to stay with her family, while Eric accepted a position at a rural mission station in Shaozhang, which served the poor. Eric Liddell joined his brother Robert at Shaozhang, who was serving there as a doctor. The mission was severely short of staff, and the missionaries were exhausted. There was an almost constant stream of locals arriving at all hours of the day and night seeking medical help. Eric Liddell arrived just in time to see his brother, who was ill and needed to return to Scotland on furlough. Internment. Fighting between the Chinese army and the Japanese invading force intensified, eventually reaching Shaozhang, and the mission station was taken over by the Japanese, and Eric Liddell returned to Tianjin. In 1943, he was interned at the Weixian internment camp, located in what is today the city of Weifang, with members of the China Inland Mission, Cheifu School, and many others. Eric Liddell became a leader and organizer at the camp, but food, medicine, and other supplies were scarce. There were a number of cliques within the camp, and when some rich businessman managed to smuggle some eggs into the camp, he shamed them into sharing. While fellow missionaries formed cliques, moralized and acted selfishly, Eric Liddell kept himself busy by aiding the elderly, teaching Bible classes at the camp school, arranging games and teaching science to the children. Those children referred to him as Uncle Eric. One of his fellow internees, Norman Cliff, who later wrote a book about his camp experiences called The Courtyard of the Happy Way, which is also translated into Chinese as the Campus of Living Truth, detailed the characters within the camp. Cliff described Eric Liddell as the finest Christian gentleman it had been my pleasure to meet. In all my time in the camp, I never heard him say a bad word about anybody. Langdon Gilkey, who also survived the camp and became a prominent theologian in USA, said of Liddell, "Often in an evening I would see him bent over a chessboard or a model boat or directing some sort of square dance, absorbed, weary and interested, pouring all of himself into this effort to capture the imagination of these penned-up youths. He was overflowing with good humour and love for life, and with enthusiasm and charm. It is rare indeed that a person has good fortune to meet a saint, but he came as close to it as anyone I have ever known." Death. In his last letter to his wife, written on the day Eric Liddell died, he wrote of suffering a nervous breakdown due to overworking. He had a brain tumour that had not been diagnosed, that, together with overwork and malnourishment, may well have hastened his death. Eric Liddell died on the 21st of February 1945, 5 months before China was liberated from Japanese occupation. Langdon Gilkey later wrote, "The entire camp, especially its youth, was stunned for days. So great was the vacuum that Eric's death had left." According to a fellow missionary, Eric Liddell's final words were, "It's complete surrender," in reference to how he had given his life to God. According to a different source, the 2007 documentary film Eric Liddell, Champion of Conviction. Eric Liddell had been in and out of the camp hospital due to the brain tumour. One of his students, Joyce Stranks, came to visit him in the hospital to discuss a book he had written about surrender to God's will. While discussing the book, Liddell reached a point where he was unable to complete the word surrender. Instead, he said, "Seren, Seren," and after this, his head fell back to his pillow and he died. Legacy. When the Scot Alan Wells won the 100-metre gold medal at the 1980 Moscow Olympics, some 56 years after the Paris Olympics, he was asked if he had run the race for the last British 100-metre winner, Harold Abrahams, who had died in 1978. "No," Wells replied, "I would prefer to dedicate this to Eric Liddell." In 2002, when the first inductees were introduced into the Scottish Sports Hall of Fame, Eric Liddell topped the public vote for the most popular sporting hero Scotland had ever produced. He was added in 2008. Liddell was then inducted into the Scottish Rugby Hall of Fame in January 2022 on the centenary of his first international cap. Weifang Memorial. Eric Liddell was buried in the garden behind the Japanese officers' quarters, his grave marked by a small wooden cross. The site was forgotten until it was rediscovered in 1989 in the grounds of what is now Weifang Middle School in Shandong Province, 480 kilometers from Beijing. The rediscovery of his burial site was largely through the determination of one man, Charles Walker, a civil engineer working in Hong Kong. Walker felt that one of Scotland's greatest heroes was in danger of being forgotten and began the search for the grave in 1987, eventually locating it from a map drawn by another inmate in 1945 and through accounts of other witnesses who were able to confirm the location. In 1991, the University of Edinburgh erected a memorial headstone made of granite from the Isle of Mull and carved by a mason from Tobermory at the site of the former camp in Weifang. The simple inscription from the book of Isaiah 40:31 reads, "They shall mount up with wings as eagles, they shall run and not be weary." The city of Weifang commemorated Eric Liddell during the 60th anniversary of the camp's liberation by laying a wreath on his grave. That brings us to the end of this video, highlighting a person of extreme talent who preferred to leave the fame he had achieved and lived his life humbly and in dedicating his Christian values towards helping others before himself. If you've enjoyed watching and has shown you the detail of life and events here in China, then your subscribing to my channel would mean a lot to me. Thank you for watching. Make sure you click on the link to the next video, and until the next time, goodbye for now.